All right, everybody. Welcome to the Comeback Team podcast. Comeback Team here, Robert Masson. I'm here with Trevor T.A. Anderson, Chuck Wolf. We're in Park City, Utah for the Park City edition. We're looking at it from a winter perspective, snow and mountain sports. All right, today we're going to focus on prepare, perform, and recovery. And what does that actually mean? You know, when you've already successfully navigated the journey from, okay, I plan on going skiing this season. I'm going to go snowboarding. I want to go snowmobiling while I'm there. Maybe some Nordic cross country. Now it's coming upon you. There's a week left, 10 days left, all the way up through the event, through the entire amount of time that you're on the mountain. You know, you've got to really, really seize the moment in understanding that how you manage that time and the space and your preparation that you've already earned. There are still pitfalls that you can find yourself in that are going to limit your performance and ultimately the happiness and the success of your trip. And, you know, it's like any high-level athletic event. We really want to teach everybody to continue to focus on all of these episodes, all of these journeys, all of these adventures in a way that you maximize your safety, you maximize your health. But at the end of the day, you increase your capabilities, you have fun, you create the adventure, you safely execute things and grow and get incredible self-esteem and positive value out of these events. And like everything else, regardless of the sport, there's a process. And I think there's a tendency in mountain sports. I mean, I've done it myself so many times, and I have so many friends I've gone with. And, you know, when you do your really peer group friend trips, there's typically alcohol involved, late nights, you're dehydrated, people aren't paying attention to nutrition, they're flying in from all over the world, all over the country for these journeys. And, you know, and I just think that there are too many trips that are marred by things gone wrong for lack of preparation. So we're going to focus this episode on preparation, performance, and recovery, and, you know, still focus on having the best time possible with your buddies, with your friends, with your family. So, you know, from a prepare phase, you know, we get down to 10 days. You pretty much have already put the body of work in. What are the last minute tune-up things that you'd suggest, TA, you know, for somebody as they know they're arriving at the mountain?
Well, first off, I think that, you know, preparation obviously is the key, but, you know, to be prepared, you must have a plan, right? You can't just go into something random and expect to prepare yourself adequately for whatever task that you have in front of you. Being from Florida, you know, as a performance trainer and movement specialist in Florida, about 15 years ago or so, I moved into a community that had a high, you know, population of people that went on ski trips in you know, February, early March, you know, late January. And, you know, one of the best compliments I always say that I ever got was, you know, a family came back to me after training them for a couple months. And they said, you know what, you know, normally when we go for our week-long ski trip, you know, by Wednesday, you know, we all have to sit down in the house around the fire and just, you know, we're all so sore. And, you know, we just plan that in our schedule as a day that we're just gonna do nothing and hang around and just relax. And Thursday, we get back on our feet and ski a little bit more. We're still sore. And Friday, we feel pretty good. And then Saturday, we come home. But this time, Coach TA, you know, I was able to ski, and by the time I got to Wednesday, I was fully expecting to be sore. I was not sore at all. I had a great day Wednesday, the entire family did, and we were able to ski all the way throughout the week without that soreness. And so, you know, a light bulb really went off for me at that time where I said, man, listen, I didn't intend on specifically creating a ski trip training program. But now I understand the value. And it wasn't just about performance. It was about, as you mentioned before, Coach, the joy that you get, the enjoyment that you get, the times that you have. You're gonna, you know, you want to remember the good skiing times, not the sore times, right? So I immediately began to develop a program and I periodized it. So like I knew if someone was gonna be leaving in the last week of January, you know, we would start in the first week of January and we would give ourselves that 3 or 4 weeks plan put together to really establish base foundational movements, you know, anaerobic endurance. You know, we do step ups and lunges and all those activities that allow us to really engage in a safe position and in a safe, you know, kind of event when we got to the ski slopes. And, you know, I've learned a lot from Chuck, you know, Coach, because Chuck is one of the world's top biomechanists, you know, and so if I ever had any questions, I normally, if I wasn't looking at some of the research or some of the things that you've done through the years, I was always trying to find new not innovative ways, but new practical ways to make sure that I can give my people the right information even a week out before they got going on their ski trip. For you, Coach, or Chuck, what is it that you've seen to be the most valuable aspect of movement as it relates to the winter sports?
Well, TA, you said a word there that resonates with me, and that's practical. Because when the athletes, your clients, get away from you, or they get away from us when they go on vacation, that doesn't mean that the training stops. Right. They need to at least do the preparation for the month, 3 weeks beforehand. But that means they need to still do some of the same preparation, maybe shorten it a bit. If the event is going to be that week of skiing, shorten it a bit, but don't stop doing the things that you had them doing. For some reason, we've got that mindset, okay, we've done our training, we're exercising, we're ready to go. But now you go into the environment where the elements of the environment are a little bit more demanding than the training. Not that the training wasn't demanding in itself, but we can't replicate in Florida or when Flatlanders, we can't replicate this environment. But that doesn't mean that we stop. You need to still do some prep if they're going to have a long day of skiing, snowboarding, or whatever the event might be. Shorten that warm-up, shorten that training session as if they were with you, just to prepare themselves so their bodies get loose. And in cold, we have a tendency to tighten up. It's natural that would happen.
You know, some of the things that, you know, as I hear you guys talk and I echo back on things we've talked about, we're always framing it from the standpoint of the highest level preparation training, but that isn't always practical for all of us. I remember vividly when I was in neurosurgery training, and in those days it was brutal compared to work requirements these days, completely different. But we were in the hospital every other night, call, in-house, no time to go to the gym, 5:30 in the morning until 9 o'clock the next day. But you know, workout, stretching, preparation. For us in training, when we put that beacon out there and we had a ski trip planned, boy, that was the holy grail. You were so excited about that the 3 months before, and I knew I didn't have time to go to the gym just because of the rigors of the training, but I found ways in the call room to do the stretching. I never took the elevator. Our patient care ward was on the 6th floor. Our OR was on the 2nd floor. Our department was on the 1st floor. I would climb the steps every time. I'd go down the steps every time. I would mimic my left-right pivot when I would go down the steps. You can adjust your normal schedule in ways where you can still prepare. It's not the optimal preparation that, you know, obviously we want people to try to do and teach them to do, but stay in the mind space, stay in the physical space, keep your activity moving and improvise. Yeah. You know, there's an art to that.
You know, people, when they've been surveyed, years ago, the fitness industry did a survey of how many people generally, not just people who are exercising, but associate with the term exercise versus the term activity. And we just need to add more activity in our life. And you gave an example just now of how you can add activity that will help you prepare. It always humored me when I would see people who are going to the gym to work out, but they're looking for the closest parking space. Let's add more activity. Park further away and get the more walking for the activity. And the same thing here.
Make simple things part of your preparation.
And the neat thing about conditioning is that when you are in shape, or if you were in shape, you fall off your patterns for a bit, but it's easier to get it back when you've been in shape than when you're not. Right. So we all go through periods where we can't be on our training plan regularly.
I echo those sentiments exactly because, you know, a lot of my athletes, you know, training from multiple different sports, you know, they go off to their season and they say, man, TA, I got out of shape during the season, you know, because, you know, the way that we plan for it, we want the training to be the most challenging thing that they do, you know, from the physical standpoint. Now, mentally, you know, altitude and different types of challenges are going to give you, you know, a different type of challenge, you know. But for us, you got to think about it, you know, we've both trained a lot of professional athletes at the highest level. But like Coach said, it's not just about the professional athletes. It's about anybody that needs to develop a routine that's going to prepare them for success.
So when you know one of your athletes is going to be on the road for 2 weeks and they're not going to have access to any of their normal facilities, what do you tell them to do?
Yeah, so for me, I always have a plan. So let's just say I have an NFL player, and I know that they're going to be going in. They have their regular general pregame routine that they do with their teams. They have their pre-practice routine stretches and calisthenics and active dynamic warm-ups that they do with their team. But I always let them know, like, you know, they can only do one broad brush stroke to try to cover everybody in the team, but each individual person is still gonna need their own thing. So carve out 15 or 20 minutes for yourself that when you put your headphones on, you can get into those areas. Maybe you need to do a little bit more stretching in your hip flexors or in your groin. You gotta be able to put yourself in a situation where you can take that 15, 20 minutes to yourself outside of what the coach is telling you, outside of myself being there to order your steps. And that has to be a part of your routine. You know, how we prepare is how we perform. And I think that if we can get ourselves to the position of preparing the right way in a similar way every time, we know exactly what we can lean on.
And one of the things that I have people always do is I need them to get their thoracic spine, their hips, and their feet and ankles to be able to be mobile. And to your point of having to follow a team preparation, or to your point, they're away from their trainer. To me, the fallback or the foundation, I should say, for performance and for their warm-up is a triplane lunge, just lunging in 3 directions, forward and back, side to side, and rotation, because it gets the hips to start opening up, gets the hips to move in all planes of motion. And then we just try and do some movement patterns that will get the thoracic spine mobile. But just that simple preparation, and it's been driven home to them when they're with us, they know what to do. Just because they're at the event, I've always told the athletes I've worked with, and I always did it when I was playing ball, is my training is one thing, but as I'm training, I'm also visualizing what it's going to be when I'm on the baseball field, or the athletes that are going to be coming out to skiing. As they're working with you, visualize that downhill, visualize the environment, visualize the cold. And
you know, I was talking about the visualization, you know, when I put on my sports spine surgeon hat. So it's every year, same thing. I have probably any given year, 50 to 75 patients who have had previous low back surgery, have had previous neck surgery. They've got a big ski trip. Sort of 2 to 3 months before, there always seems to be an appointment regarding this upcoming trip. And you know, we kind of recap the same fundamental things. You know, there's this extra visualization component that I always focus on clinically, because really, particularly if you've already had a spine surgery, or maybe it's a joint surgery or hip or knee or shoulder, what you're really most concerned about is going out of your way to wake up the injured zone. You have a clear vulnerability, and you know it, and that inherently gives you lack of confidence. Obviously, it's a risk, and when people make these decisions to go do mountain sports or any sport after they've had a major orthopedic problem of any kind, it's obviously a risk, but there are ways to mitigate the risk. So preparation, with the kind of stuff that you guys always help out with, is key, but there are personal, private things that I always encourage them to focus on. Not the fear, don't dread it, don't project negativity, don't visualize what could happen. Visualize how you're gonna adapt in your performance, in your activity, how you're gonna protect yourself. You know, what are your limits? Know ahead of time. You know, stand tall. If you're feeling the peer pressure in a group, set your limits before you show up and make them absolute. And there's so much you can do within the activity. People really rarely get hurt in the first 90% of the activity they're doing. It's that last 10%, whether it be the last 10% of their limit, where they're pushing their limit, or whether it's 2 in the afternoon, they feel spent, their quads are out, their back's tightening up, they're already tight. Oh, let's do one more. And you know, and especially if you're in the group dynamics, really to me represent a bigger risk than the activity itself. So, you know, pace yourself, you know, and that's, so that simple little fundamental thing that we all know, but we take for granted. It's a reminder. And when I'm talking to a patient who's had surgery before, number one most important thing is set your limit, pace yourself, and visualize what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and what kind of runs you're going to succeed with.
you know, the things that I tell my clients and patients is I don't care if you're a 45-year-old stud of an athlete or if you're a 45-year-old sedentary executive. Don't compare you to others. Right. When I do an evaluation on you, I'm comparing you to you. And your performance out here should be what standards you set for yourself, not the peer group. Right. The peer pressure can create a lot of issues where you overreach. If you've had that injury and this is your first time coming out onto the slopes, start slow, test it. You talked about confidence just a little while ago. As they start slow and they're feeling better about it, and then they go a little bit more intensely.
The slow build.
It's a slow build, and with that slow build, the confidence goes up with it. But compare you to you, not to anybody else. When I do evaluations on people, I don't care about the normative data. I want to know how you feel, how your movements are. When I'm doing your evaluation, do an intervention, how do you feel? How's your motion afterwards? And if you're feeling better, then you're successful. You get more confidence, which makes me successful because you're feeling better.
And with that information, it sets the tone for the preparation, right? Then ultimately it leads to the performance. And then there's the recovery, right? So we have to make sure that if we are on this long ski trip, our recovery is just as important as our performance. As a matter of fact, it's the most critical aspect. If you start skiing on Monday, the steps that you take to recover Monday evening to prepare for Tuesday are critically important. Whether it's a stretch down, a cool down, making sure you're adequately hydrated. We make a common mistake of thinking that because it's cold outside that we don't need to drink as much water. But I would argue, when I was skiing the other day with Coach, that a Florida boy had about 20 layers on underneath, and 19 of them were soaking wet, where I had to wring them out. So and I was never cold, but being able to replenish what my body has given up, what the sweat that I have earned needs to be replenished. The nutrition needs to be replenished. I need to prepare my body not just for tomorrow, but to recover from today. And that transition, getting the appropriate amount of rest and whatnot. I know I want to rush back to the slopes, but I have to have the right rest to make sure that my body is as safe as it was on Monday on Tuesday morning.
Excuse me one moment, but it's very dry here. So even though you may not be exercising, you're still losing fluids by evaporation. We need to hydrate, and it isn't just hydrating here. I really suggest hydrating many days before, 2 to 5 days beforehand. And you mentioned something earlier when people are coming on vacation, and that's the alcohol aspect. Limit the alcohol intake because alcohol is going to, it's a diuretic, and it's going to cause you to lose fluids.
Yeah, but everybody's going to do it, and so it's just balance. It's the moderation concept. I get so many questions about, should I ice, Coach? Should I, heating pads? Can I go in the hot tub? From a sports science perspective, what do you tell your pro athletes?
Well, when we're talking about preparing for exercise, icing is something that you want to do to recover from exercise. There may be some inflammation. Maybe you take some ibuprofen, to reduce anti-inflammatories, and also the ice is going to help do that. But when you're preparing to perform, you don't want to ice it before you go outside. That's when you want to add heat. That's when you want to, warm up, sometimes gets misconstrued because they think that means temperature. But really, warm up is neuro. We need to warm up the neuromuscular pathways and connections just as much as we have to warm the tissue of the area to prepare it to perform.
Yeah, I usually clinically focus on, for that, what's your vulnerable spot? Is it your low back? Is it your hip? Is it your neck or shoulder? Is it in between your shoulder blades? And, have a separate focus on your injured zone for rest and recovery, because you really want to not only treat it and get ahead of it, and you also want to be aware of any limitations that you've earned. And and bottom line is, if you're feeling sore, if you feel like you're waking it up, pause. If you're a community member who's had surgery with me, you've heard me say baby steps forward and pause when you feel like something's activated or something's waking up. See if you can let it go away. If it's related to a severe joint inflammation or a severe nerve inflammation, and you keep pushing, you're going to ultimately create a fire in there. And that fire is going to linger and stay, and it could, create another problem. If you back off early, a little bit of rest, postpone, delay, put the activity off a few hours, next day, doesn't matter. If you're in the midst of an injury, recognize it, pause, reset, start again, baby steps forward. And people execute it safely all the time.
I love what you said. You said you have to make sure you tend to limitations that you have earned. If you think about it, every opportunity, every movement that we make and every activity we engage in, we're going to achieve either some sort of success or there's some sort of failure. But failure doesn't mean you failed, right? Muscle failure in a performance environment means we took ourselves to a limit that demanded a response from our body, as long as we can get to that position safely. And like Chuck was saying, when you're in the training environment, we're not training at half speed to come out here to perform full speed. We're training at a much higher rate of speed, a much higher rate of anaerobic endurance demands. And then, and again, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna use that more often now. Limitations that you've earned. So when you come back here and you have in your